how does a mega corporation sell, almost $200 billion worth of merchandise in 3 months, raise its financial outlook, and still watch its stock just absolutely plummet?
Yeah, it's wild.
Right. And how does the U.S. government try to flex its muscle to manage a $40 trillion debt crisis, only to get basically swatted down by the bond market?
Instantly swatted down.
Exactly. So today, we're looking at what happens when the people pulling the levers of power realize they aren't actually connected to the machine.
Yeah, we have a really fascinating stack of sources today from the August 21st, 2026 edition of the Daily Grind News. And the thematic through line for all of these stories is the absolute limits of control.
Right.
We're examining how world leaders, the U.S. Treasury, mega corporations, and politicians try to sort of brute force outcomes.
And then they just face this massive pushback from reality, right?
Right, from markets, from biology, and just basic human nature.
Yeah. But hey, before we dive into the content, I need to make a quick but really important note. Today's sources contain some pretty politically charged material. We're talking about figures from both the left and the right.
Yeah, heavy stuff today.
It is. So I want to make it very, very clear that neither of us here is endorsing any viewpoints. We are not taking sides, and we're not casting judgment.
Right, absolutely.
Our mission in this deep dive is strictly to report the facts exactly as they're presented in the source material. We're here to help you understand the news, not to tell you how to feel about it.
Exactly. We're simply looking at the machinery of these events.
Right.
And examining why certain political and economic levers are just failing to produce their intended results.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with what might be the ultimate attempt at top-down control on the global stage, which is economic warfare.
Oh, yeah.
The source material outlines President Trump's threat to launch what he is calling an economic D-Day against Iran.
And anyone trading with them.
Right, against any nation trading with them.
Which is a huge deal. I mean, this represents a massive escalation.
Right, because we already have sanctions.
Exactly. The U.S. already has extensive direct sanctions in place, so American companies can't do business with Iran.
Right.
There's also a blockade, while Iran heavily restricts traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. But what's being proposed now is a full pivot to secondary sanctions.
Yeah, and for anyone maybe a little rusty on the mechanics, direct sanctions are about stopping your own citizens from trading with a target.
Right.
But secondary sanctions mean Washington is telling the rest of the world, hey, if you do business with Iran, you cannot do business with the United States.
You're out.
Exactly. You get cut out of the U.S. financial system, you get blocked from international banking networks, the whole 9 yards.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is claiming this operation will actually collapse the Iranian regime.
Wow.
Yeah, he's warning allies and the rest of the world to make a decision, and we're expecting specific details to roll out on Monday.
But what's fascinating here is just the sheer scale of that gamble, right? Washington is trying to turn Iran into this complete economic island, but by relying on secondary sanctions, they're essentially handing the bill for building that moat to other sovereign nations.
Right. You're forcing other countries to just absorb the economic damage of your own foreign policy.
And the 800-pound gorilla in the room here is obviously China.
Oh, absolutely.
Bessent noted that China currently buys about 90% of Iranian oil.
90%.
Right. But when reporters asked him if Beijing itself would be targeted by these new sanctions, he declined to say.
Of course he did.
And unsurprisingly, Beijing is already pushing back. They put out a statement saying sanctions and pressure tactics are not the solution, and they called for a return to negotiations.
Which just completely exposes the inherent limit of this lever.
Yeah.
You know, you can declare an economic D-Day, but when the primary consumer of the targeted nation's primary export is a global superpower like China, enforcement becomes a complete geopolitical minefield. I mean, you risk triggering a much larger economic conflict.
Right. It's like trying to starve out a massive fortress, right?
Yeah.
You build this giant wall, you surround the gates, you declare nothing goes in or out.
Right.
But the biggest, most powerful supplier in the neighborhood, which is China, has a secret underground tunnel leading straight into the fortress kitchen.
Yeah.
And you're just standing at the front gate wondering why the people inside aren't surrendering.
That's a great analogy. And we also have to look at the psychology inside that fortress.
Right.
Iranian officials are not showing any signs of backing down.
No, not at all.
Mohammad Baker Kalibaf, who is Iran's parliamentary speaker and their main negotiator with the U.S., he was speaking in Iraq recently.
Okay.
And he framed this entire economic offensive as basically an admission of failure.
Interesting.
Yeah, he claimed that because the U.S. and Israel realized they couldn't defeat Iran in a, hard military war, they've been forced into this cognitive and economic one.
Ah, I see. And then Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi even went a step further, labeling the strategy economic terrorism. Yeah. And this is all playing out while diplomatic efforts to end the broader conflict are completely stalled.
Right.
Because that 60-day memorandum for negotiations recently expired.
And Saida Tusi, he's a senior fellow of the Center for International Policy. He makes a really critical point here regarding the threshold for pain.
Okay.
He notes that Iranian hardliners view this entire situation as an existential threat.
Oh, meaning it's literally life or death for the regime.
Exactly. When a regime believes its very survival is on the line, their willingness to just absorb massive economic suffering to survive goes through the roof.
Which really makes me question Secretary Bessent's optimism here. Yeah. He's confidently stating this operation is going to collapse the regime.
Right.
But if decades of previous sanctions haven't forced Tehran to fold, and these hardliners are willing to absorb basically endless suffering to hold on to power, isn't this just a massive game of global chicken?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's testing the absolute limits of financial pressure against the human instinct for regime survival. The U.S. is pulling the lever of global financial dominance as hard as it possibly can.
Yeah.
But the political reality on the ground in Tehran is just pushing back with equal force.
And, the U.S. government isn't just facing resistance when trying to control the global economy.
No.
They are hitting a total brick wall trying to control their own domestic borrowing costs.
Oh, this is huge.
The Treasury is finding out very quickly that global financial markets don't take orders from Washington.
Yeah, the numbers driving this are just staggering. I mean, the U.S. national debt just crossed $40 trillion.
$40 trillion. Let that sink in.
Right.
Yeah.
And the bond market is reacting aggressively to that milestone by pushing borrowing costs way up.
So the Treasury attempted to step in to sort of massage those borrowing costs down.
Right.
They announced they'd be at least doubling their buybacks of long-term debt.
Starting September 9th, yeah.
Right. And that exceeds their initial $4 billion plan. And let's break down the mechanics of why they actually do that. When the Treasury buys back its own long-term debt, they are essentially, artificially reducing the supply of bonds on the market.
Exactly.
And less supply usually drives the price of the bonds up.
Right. And since bond prices and yields, they move in opposite directions, driving the price up should theoretically push the yield down.
Meaning the borrowing cost goes down.
Exactly. But the market only entertained that theory for about an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the 30-year yield initially dropped roughly 10 basis points after hitting a 19-year high.
Okay.
But the relief evaporated almost immediately.
Right. The market just swiftly and ruthlessly rejected the intervention.
Yeah.
The benchmark 10-year yield actually climbed more than 5 basis points to 4.704%.
Which was higher than before the announcement.
Exactly. And the 30-year yield shot back up to 5.248%.
Unbelievable.
And meanwhile, the 2-year yield, which is much more sensitive to whatever the Fed does with interest rates, it barely moved at all.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the bond market is sending Washington a very stark message.
Yeah.
You cannot massage a $40 trillion structural problem with a $4 billion or even an $8 billion press release.
Right.
Investors are looking right past the Treasury's Band-Aid and focusing on the underlying structural forces driving the economy.
And those structural forces are massive.
Yeah.
I mean, you have stubborn inflation. The July Fed minutes just showed officials might need to keep interest rates elevated if inflation doesn't cool down.
Right.
Then you have corporations borrowing enormous sums of money to fund this massive AI build-out.
Right, the artificial intelligence boom.
Yeah. And the broader economy is still running surprisingly hot.
It is.
Like the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index just posted its strongest reading since April 2021.
And Maya Crook, she's a senior research analyst at J.P. Morgan Chase. She warned that these Treasury buybacks actually mask underlying structural challenges. Yeah, she pointed out that stepping away from the Treasury's traditional, regular and predictable approach to bond issuance, that could ultimately increase higher risk premia.
I see. So to put that in everyday terms for our listeners, it's like trying to improve your credit score by paying off a $10 credit card bill when you have a $400,000 mortgage you can't afford.
Right. The bank is going to notice the mortgage.
Exactly. Or, it's like trying to bail out a sinking cruise ship with a soup spoon.
Yeah.
The bond market isn't looking at the spoon. They're looking at the massive hole in the hull, The $40 trillion debt, the sticky inflation, the AI borrowing.
Right.
And they are charging a massive premium for the risk of staying on board. Because the government is acting unpredictably, investors are demanding higher returns just to lend them money.
The Treasury trying to pull a lever to manipulate the market, and the market just responded by making it even more expensive for the government to borrow money.
Which is wild. And that same underlying inflation making the bond market so nervous is also breaking the back of the American consumer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which leads us to this massive corporate paradox. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
It's not just the government facing pushback from financial markets. Corporate America's biggest giant, Walmart, is learning that controlling your own financial narrative doesn't guarantee Wall Street will buy it.
Yeah. Walmart just posted $186.1 billion in quarterly sales.
Insane numbers.
That is a 5.9% increase. Their U.S. e-commerce sales surged an impressive 24%.
Wow.
They even raised their full-year outlook. They expect net sales to grow 4 to 5% and operating income to rise 7 to 8.5%.
So on paper, they are completely crushing it.
Totally.
Nearly $200 billion in merchandise sold in just 3 months. And yet, investors took a sledgehammer to the stock.
Yeah, they did.
It dropped 9.2% in a single day, which is its worst day in more than 4 years.
Wow.
It's now sitting 23% below its record close from just 3 months ago. So how does a company sell that much stuff, raise its future outlook, and still get punished like that by the market?
Because Wall Street isn't just looking at the top-line revenue. They're looking at the mechanics of where that growth is coming from.
Okay.
And more importantly, who is no longer shopping.
Ah.
U.S. comparable store sales only rose 2.6%, which is the weakest quarterly increase since 2020.
And just to clarify for our listeners, comparable store sales, or comps, they measure the revenue from stores that have been open for at least a year, right? It strips out the growth that just comes from opening brand new locations.
Right, so it gives you the true health of the existing retail footprint.
Got it.
And that health is faltering, with physical store traffic actually dropping in the low single digits.
Wow. Net income also fell 9.4% to $6.37 billion. Now, Walmart pointed out that new pharmacy pricing regulations were a heavy drag, and they said without them, comparable sales would have been 3.4%.
Right. But
Wall Street is treating Walmart as the canary in the coal mine for the broader U.S. consumer economy.
Exactly. I mean, the high-earning households, those making $100,000 or more, they're increasingly migrating to Walmart for groceries.
Because everyone wants a deal.
Right. But they are masking the fact that the lower-income consumer is completely tapped out, largely crushed by higher gas prices.
Wow. So when the biggest retailer in the world reports that their core everyday shopper is tightening their belt, Wall Street panics.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much high-end market share they're actually gaining.
And Walmart's CFO, John David Rainey, he pushed back really hard on how investors are interpreting these numbers.
What did he say?
He argued that separating physical store sales from digital sales is a legacy fixation.
A legacy fixation.
Yeah, he pointed out that 80% of their online orders are actually fulfilled directly through their physical stores.
Oh, that makes sense. So they've essentially turned their massive footprint of retail locations into a giant hyper-local warehouse and distribution network.
Exactly.
Right.
Rainey literally said, "We are not the Walmart of a decade ago."
Yeah.
They're building alternative revenue streams around advertising and memberships. They even used $2.9 billion in tariff refunds to basically cut prices and support those initiatives.
But again, we see the limits of control, right?
Yeah.
Walmart can redesign its entire fulfillment model, successfully leverage its stores as warehouses, and post $186 billion in sales.
Right.
But if the market decides the core American consumer is wavering, Wall Street will rewrite your narrative in a single trading session.
Without hesitation.
Yeah. And the perfect example of that tapped-out core consumer is what's happening at the grocery store.
Oh, yes, specifically the meat counter.
Right. We're seeing another attempt to sort of brute force a solution, this time involving agricultural trade policy.
Where Washington is discovering it absolutely cannot legislate biology.
Exactly. The pain point here is beef prices. Ground beef averaged $6.89 a pound in July.
Which is crazy.
That's a 10% increase year over year.
And in places like California and the Pacific Northwest, it's running around $10 a pound.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the backyard hamburger has essentially become a luxury item.
So the Trump administration announced a temporary fix to try and bring prices down.
Right.
The U.S. will loosen tariffs to allow up to 300,000 metric tons of imported ground beef to enter the country for 90 days.
90 days, okay.
Yeah, without triggering higher tariffs. And they claim this imported beef will be sold at 25% below current market prices.
It's a profound policy contradiction, though, isn't it?
How so?
We spent years listening to political arguments about how tariff walls are essential to protect American agricultural producers from foreign competition.
Right.
But the moment the price of a standard burger hits $7 to $10 and the consumer panics, the government immediately pokes a massive 300,000 metric ton hole in that tariff wall just to save the American barbecue.
That is so true. And this raises an important question about the friction between political timelines and biological reality.
Yeah.
The administration has tried pulling multiple levers to fix this. They launched an antitrust investigation into the major meat packers.
Okay.
They proposed funding for smaller processors, and they even reopened southern ports to Mexican cattle.
Right.
But none of that changes the underlying biological math.
Because the root cause isn't a trade policy.
Okay.
It's the physical lack of cows.
Right.
Due to years of severe drought and incredibly tough financial conditions for ranchers, the U.S. entered 2026 with roughly 86.2 million cattle and calves.
Okay.
That is the smallest domestic cattle herd since the 1950s.
Wow, the 1950s.
Yeah. The shortage of cows to process is so severe that meatpacking giant Tyson just announced they are closing a major Illinois beef processing plant.
Gosh. And that's their second shutdown just this year.
So you're watching a 90-day political cycle basically collide with a 2-year biological cycle.
Yeah.
Washington can write an executive order to pause tariffs for a few months. But as beef industry officials continually point out, the only durable solution to high prices is physically rebuilding the American cattle herd.
And you cannot pass legislation forcing a cow to gestate faster.
No, you really can't.
Rebuilding the herd takes roughly 2 years, minimum. The levers of government control are fast and reactive.
Right.
But the physical reality of agricultural reproduction is agonizingly slow. Biology just sets a hard limit on what a policy can achieve.
Exactly. We've seen biological cycles, market forces, and geopolitics completely reject top-down control.
Yeah.
But sometimes the immovable force isn't nature or the economy.
Right.
Sometimes it's the rigid machinery of our own institutions.
Which brings us to our final segment. We want to look at how the realities of scandal and electoral mechanics can instantly derail political power.
We have 2 cases here involving politicians facing severe allegations. But the electoral systems around them are operating on completely different gears.
Right. And again, as a reminder to our listeners, we are strictly looking at the institutional mechanics of these events as they're reported in our sources without taking any political sides.
Absolutely. Let's look at the mechanics of Eric Swalwell's departure first.
Okay.
He's a Democrat from California. Federal agents stopped Swalwell at an airport, seized his electronic devices, and executed a search warrant at his Washington, D.C. home.
Wow.
This is part of a federal investigation into severe sexual misconduct allegations from multiple women, which include accusations of rape, sexual assault, and sending unsolicited nude photos.
And he's also reportedly under criminal investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
Right.
But Swalwell strongly maintains his innocence. He denies the allegations entirely.
Yes, he does.
His attorney, Sarah Azari, labeled them false, fabricated, and deeply offensive, a calculated and transparent political hit job. So it's very crucial to note these remain accusations, and there is no criminal conviction.
Right. But the institutional fallout was practically instantaneous.
Yeah.
Swalwell had been a leading candidate for California governor. He immediately dropped out of that race and resigned his House seat entirely.
And here is where the mechanics of California's electoral system moved at lightning speed.
Yeah.
Democrat Aisha Wahab, she's a former state senator. She has already won the special election to finish out his term.
Wow, already.
Yeah, she defeated another Democrat, Melissa Hernandez. And for listeners unfamiliar with why 2 Democrats are running against each other, California uses a jungle primary system.
Right.
That means all candidates run on the exact same ballot regardless of their political party, and the top 2 vote getters advance.
Got it.
So because of that system, Wahab and Hernandez will face off again in November.
The contrast between the legal track and the electoral track here is just incredible.
Isn't it?
The justice system is just beginning its slow process of executing warrants and conducting investigations.
Right.
But the political machinery has already completely replaced him.
Yeah, his political career evaporated so fast that his replacement is sitting at his desk before charges are even filed.
It's wild.
Now, contrast that incredibly fluid, rapid-fire political exit with the really rigid situation surrounding Republican Representative Max Miller in Ohio.
Right. The Daily Grind News details a police investigation into how Miller's 2-year-old daughter suffered a fractured right collarbone and an apparent handprint-shaped bruise.
Gosh.
Yeah, which included what looked like a thumbprint on her shoulder.
Awful. And the investigation showed that 4 adults had access to the child during the time frame of the injury.
Right. Miller, his ex-wife Emily Moreno, who was actually the daughter of Republican Senator Bernie Moreno Miller's girlfriend, and the child's nanny.
Okay.
And all 4 adamantly denied hurting the little girl or knowing what happened.
Right. Police reviewed surveillance footage, photos, and they conducted extensive interviews, but they couldn't establish how or when the injury occurred. They even ruled out a theory about a car seat strap causing the bruise. So in April, County Children and Family Services determined the child abuse allegation against Miller was unsubstantiated, finding no evidence to support it.
But the agency did classify abuse as indicated for an unknown perpetrator.
Oh, meaning what?
Meaning they found signs of abuse but simply couldn't figure out who did it.
I see.
By May, prosecutors concluded there was insufficient admissible evidence to even convene a grand jury. The police report officially ended with case closed, prosecution declined.
Now, the investigation did expose a highly toxic custody battle.
Yeah, very.
Emily Moreno alleged Miller once held a gun to her head while she changed a diaper and threw her against a wall, which are allegations Miller completely denies.
Right.
Miller initially thought the injury might be an accident, but later told investigators regarding Moreno, she did it, she's guilty.
Wow.
Though his spokesman now says he won't speculate on the cause.
And here's where the institutional mechanics completely stall out.
Yeah.
Criminally, the case against Miller is closed. He was officially cleared by local police.
Right.
But politically, he remains under an active House ethics investigation regarding the situation. However, unlike Swalwell in California, who could just resign and trigger a fast special election, Miller is trapped by the calendar.
What do you mean?
The strict deadline for Republicans to replace him on the Ohio November ballot actually passed on August 10th.
Oh, wow. Which leaves the party apparatus completely stuck.
Stuck.
They have a candidate who was cleared by the justice system, but who is running under the heavy cloud of an unresolved ethics probe and ugly public allegations in what should be a safely Republican district.
Right.
And Democrats now see a sudden opening there.
It's a stunning look at how disconnected these institutional tracks really are.
Oh, absolutely.
You have the justice system, ballot deadlines, and public optics, all operating on entirely different timelines.
Yeah. One politician is out of office and replaced in the blink of an eye while maintaining innocence against active federal probes. The other is cleared of criminal charges by police, but is trapped on a ballot with no way for his party to pivot because an arbitrary August deadline has passed.
The control here doesn't belong to the politicians or even the voters.
Right.
It belongs to the calendar and the specific, inflexible rules of the institutions they operate within.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We looked at a $40 trillion debt pushing back against the U.S. Treasury's buyback strategies.
Yeah.
We looked at a $6.89 pound of ground beef forcing a pause in trade tariffs because, well, you just can't speed up a biological reproduction cycle.
Nope.
We watched Walmart post almost $200 billion in sales, only to have their stock crushed by investors worried about the underlying consumer.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw the geopolitical limits of trying to economically isolate a nation that feels its very survival is at stake.
In every single one of these stories, we see a powerful entity trying to brute force a top-down solution, only to violently collide with a complex system that absolutely refuses to yield.
Right. Whether you're steering the global economy, a massive corporate empire, or just a political campaign, pulling the lever as hard as you can usually just ends up revealing the absolute limits of your own control.
It makes me think back to the phrase used by Walmart CFO John David Rainey.
Yeah.
He talked about a legacy fixation, being stuck judging the present by the rules of the past.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think that's the perfect lens for all this. Are we collectively suffering from a legacy fixation in how we view the world?
That's a great point.
We're trying to use 20th century tools like brute force tariffs, localized bond buybacks, and traditional political maneuvering to control 21st century highly interconnected problems.
That is a fascinating way to frame it.
If our tools no longer match our reality, what happens when the levers we're pulling finally snap?
Man, something to think about the next time you try to force a solution against the current. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.